everyone, Samita here. Welcome or welcome back to my channel. Today we're going to be talking about Saturn again because of course I'm obsessed with Saturn. I'm kind of a kook today, deal with me. Today we're going to discuss why Saturn's theme centrally is isolation, and if you're going through a Saturnian period, you might deal with themes of isolation almost always, certainly. And there's a reason why Saturn does this. Not just to punish you, give you your karma, isolate you. Saturn is always supporting and rooting for your soul's greatest evolution and your strength as a human being. So, everything that Saturn does ultimately always pushes you to your highest good, whether that's within your lifetime period or after your lifetime for your soul evolution, right? So everything that Saturn does has a reason rooted in your evolution and growth, and we've established this already across a lot of videos. But today we'll talk about why isolation specifically as a theme is important, and delve into how that affects the individual going through a period of isolation that is introduced into their lives by Shani Dev. Let's get into it. Point one, Saturn will remove dependency and make you independent in a lot of ways. And this is not just in terms of emotional support, not just in terms of financial support, but also in terms of fundamentally just support and validation for things about you that you needed validated from the world around you. Saturn will remove everything that keeps you together sometimes so that you can confront all the things that you think you can't live without. And you can see where your strength lies if these things are taken away from you in the external world. Saturn will force you to look inward and complete things that are incomplete within yourself, and often remove dependency from the external world and make you more dependent on your inner selves. Now, how can you be dependent on your inner self if your inner self is not like groomed and taken care of, and you don't recognize what your inner self carries? And that's where self discovery comes in because of Saturnian period. Saturn forces you to look inward, and that's why removing dependency is important, because if you're always content and you're fulfilled with what the world outside is giving you, how are you going to look inward for completion? You're always going to look outside. So, Saturn removes your dependency on the external world so that you can cultivate a deeper relationship with yourself, understand yourself better, and derive from yourself what you seek externally. That's why you will often notice that one best friend that always was there for your emotional support is gone, and usually you relied on him or her to process difficult emotions or difficult time periods in your life, and now you have to do it yourself and learn how to self-regulate and understand how to come out of a distressing emotional situation by yourself. For example, everything in the external world you use as crutches, Saturn will remove. Saturn, that's why, also does not like intoxicants, right? We've talked about this. Saturn wants you to face yourself, face your emotions, face life head on with your conscience intact and not escape and choose escapism. So often you will see people undergoing Saturnian periods, either they automatically let go of substances because they feel like, you know what, I don't feel like it's for me anymore. A lot of people, when they hit their peak or middle or even the beginning of Sadisati, they will just automatically be less and less inclined to indulge in consuming alcohol or other substances. Sometimes by hook or by crook, Saturn is like, okay, if you're addicted, Saturn comes around as like lessons where you have to quit. For example, I've seen someone who is very young and just started his Sadisati and was a chronic smoker. But then in his late 20s, not even like 30s or 40s, in his late 20s, he had a heart attack and he had to quit cold turkey all of his addictive patterns, right? Saturn will make sure that substances, um, you know, are not in your life. But even if you are indulging in substances, Saturn makes it much more harder for life to be easy for you, because if you're going to run from one thing, Saturn's going to give you 100 other things to deal with that you cannot run from. That's why dependency, things that we use as crutches in the external world, Saturn often isolates us from those things: people, substances, whatever makes life externally easy. This brings about character development. This brings about a stronger connection to yourself, self realization, knowing who you are, and that's why Shani comes around and enables this to happen. During Saturnian period, boundaries are clarified, right? Saturn rules Aquarius, and Aquarius is home to the nakshatra Shatabishak, that is quite literally the nakshatra of boundaries. But Shatabishak is ruled by Rahu. But Saturn rules Aquarius and Capricorn, even Libra. And if you notice, all these signs, Aquarius and Libra has a lot to do with managing. Libra has a lot to do with managing relationships, and Aquarius has a lot to do with managing communities and networks. Capricorn has a lot to do with business and building something, and all of this requires dealing with people, dealing with the collective, right? Dealing with the other in terms of Libra. And how can you have healthy relationships with people without boundaries, right? You need to communicate your boundaries, you need to assert your boundaries. And when I say boundaries, it's not always like, oh my god, you versus me, this is my likes and dislikes, people have to respect that. No, boundaries can simply be managing your time and not letting somebody take too much of your time because you have your personal commitments. And something as simple as knowing how to say, like, hey, like, my family is waiting for me, I need to leave, I need to cut short this meeting, but it was great talking to you. That's the ability to draw a boundary when a conversation is leaking into your personal time. Boundaries make relationships healthier, boundaries make relationships better, prevents resentment, right? That's a different conversation altogether. We'll have a psychological video about the importance of boundaries. But astrologically speaking, Saturn strengthens your boundaries. You are able to do away with surface level talk. Superficiality is not something that you can tolerate during Saturnian periods. So you need to be real with yourself and real with other people, so you know much more clearly where you end and where another person begins in this material world. Also, you know your limits. So nothing teaches you boundaries like isolation does, because when you're isolated, you're not people pleasing, you're not, you're accountable for nobody else, you're responsible for nobody else but yourself. A lot of the times isolation is just like you versus you and you together, right? So you learn yourself more, you learn what your tolerance is, you learn what you will accept from the world and what you won't, because you know yourself that much more better because of the time you spent with yourself. So through isolation, Saturn teaches you how to draw boundaries. Those of you who have tasted isolation know how addictive it can be. And this is not unhealthy isolation, this is just inevitable isolation that comes about in your life at least once or twice, right? You do have periods of, I want to be alone, I want to stay with myself, I want me time. So, if you've noticed, a lot of times your ability to identify your boundaries comes from the time you spend with yourself. Saturn facilitates that very process in your life. He makes you understand who you are and what you want to attract into your life, what you don't want to attract into your life, and what is important versus what is not important, what is conducive for your path and journey, and for you to contribute to society in the way your soul intends to or is intended to, versus what drains your energy and prevents you from contributing to your purpose, which is also a very Saturn themed thing, right? Purpose and contribution to society, Aquarius, right? So that's point number 2. Illusion requires company. Reality can be faced alone. A lot of the things that we tend to give our energy and effort and minds and thoughts to, like hierarchy, things like systems, things like comparison, things like egos clashing, all of this exists within the illusion of the ego, right? Illusion of separate identities, illusion of you versus me, him versus her, illusion of the world around us being something that's not interconnected. Reality is we're so connected to one another. Life today severs us from the reality, the lifestyles, the intoxicants, the habits, the separation that has been created in order for capitalism to thrive, in order for different segregations to exist. We are often blinded to the reality that we're all so interconnected and we're all so a network of beings that are constantly energetically feeding off of each other. Reality shatters the ego illusion and shows you that you belong to the next person as much as the next person belongs to somebody else, right? Um, Saturn teaches you compassion through suffering. You go through something, you realize life is hard for not just me, for everybody. Everybody is going through so much. Saturn initiates you into reality, and reality of life, reality of death, reality of suffering, reality of humanity. We can't live in illusions of hierarchies, illusions of glamour, illusions of everything is always hunky dory in the world, everything is, black and white. So, isolation allows you to step outside the noise, step outside constructs of society and assess it from afar and see what is what and see what things are for what they are instead of the glorified, glamorized version of it, right? Saturn isolates you so that you can tune into truth more and have a bird's eye view of what everything really is, instead of being caught in illusion, caught in day to day, everything, the drama, the bickering, the comparison, constant weighing yourself on a scale, being a part of some sort of race. Saturn shatters that and says, that's all happening there, but like, let me put you away from it and see it from afar. So that's the purpose of isolation, also, so that you can have a healthy view of reality and you're not sucked in, pulled into any illusory construct that the material world often has to offer. The fourth and final point, Saturn isolates you to prepare you for responsibility. Leadership is not created and manifested in your aura within crowds, within systems. It requires a certain level of self perception that is cultivated from spending time with yourself, from understanding yourself, from knowing what works versus what doesn't. And all of these things are forged in solitude. They're forged when the pressure you put on yourself, or the pressure human beings put on themselves to be seen perfectly or received perfectly or not judged or to fit in, when you let go of these pressures, there's something beautiful that gets formed. There's a certain confidence that comes about. There's a certain certainty in yourself that you can lead and you can pave your own path and you can pave a path that is true to the person that you are. So, leadership qualities are forged in solitude. More often than not, people go through things alone and they understand things alone, come to realizations alone. They have the confidence to lead alone. Leading requires you to be alone. You're not dependent on anybody to give you permission to lead. You're not required on people to tell you to do this, to do that. You take a stand. You follow your gut, follow your instinct. Something is important to you, you want to make sure it's given more importance to by more people, you're going to take the first step and going to start giving it importance yourself and lead by example, right? Leading doesn't always mean power over other people. It means leading by example. It means embodying the change in the world that you want to see and setting an example so others can also get inspired and follow the same example, right? So, responsibility requires self trust, it requires restraint, it requires gravity, it requires grit and grace. And these things are often forged in solitude. These things are forged when you discover yourself more. And constantly being in a state of relating with other people, or, weighing yourself against another person's judgments or praise or inclusion versus exclusion, these things always prevent you from cultivating your own self trust. Isolation enables self trust. This is why Saturn comes about to usually isolate us from everything that we're used to, from familiar comforting patterns, from being liked and loved by everybody. If you notice, Madhyam Charan Sadesati, the middle 2 years of Saturnian periods, or even the first 2 years, people going through Sadesati will often feel like they don't belong anywhere. They might feel, as a human design manifest, I feel it, they might feel very isolated, they might feel very misunderstood, they might feel like the world around them doesn't get them, they might feel like isolating. But with all of this comes a lot of personal growth, spiritual growth, a lot of strength being cultivated, a lot of fortitude, a lot of courage, a lot of ability to lead, ability to trust yourself enough so that others can also see that self trust and trust you also with the journey that you're on and get on board, right? So, this is why Saturn isolates you. Tomorrow, if you read somewhere that, oh, Saturnian period is coming, I'm going to get alone, I'm going to be alone, do not be afraid. Being alone for a period of time in your life is one of the biggest blessings that you can ever have. So, take this in stride. If you feel alone, know that the universe loves you. It's trying to make something great out of you. And that's why you are feeling alone. Loneliness and feeling alone are essential experiences. And I think Saturn knows that. Saturn's trying to tell you that. They're not experiences to fear. Yes, they can suck from time to time, but you're almost always never alone. The divine is always with you. Thank you so much for watching. Please like, share, comment, subscribe, hit the post notification so we can stay connected. And I will see you next time. Bye.